Still, the matter needed to be addressed. We're exposed here without our servants. Laying a hand upon the weathered hand upon the table, he fixed the brunette with a measuring look. Surely you understand that. And? Muscle jumped in Kyrie's jaw. We can't count on Ruler if it comes to a fight. The necromancer pressed, finally drawing a scathing look from his ally as a dainty sneeze answered from a nearby room. She's sworn herself to neutrality. Remember, when she didn't challenge him, he bowled on ahead in spite of her silence. And you just let 3/4 of our forces walk out the door. Who knows when they'll return? If the enemy finds us here, we won't be able to retreat. Ren. I understand your concerns, but would you kindly calm down? With a tempered sigh born of hardened steel, the younger Magus finally raised her icy gaze to meet his. Kyrie nearly balked. Spirits? He'd forgotten just how vicious Jean could be when backed into a corner. After all, she was a monster who specialized in combat, one who removed any and all opposition without mercy. To think otherwise was akin to anathema for him. For all her social awkwardness and odd mannerisms, Jean was nearly his equal when it came to Magus combat. She'd likely gut him with one of her chakrams if he continued his present course of action. Allies they might well be, but he didn't want to push her too far. No need to concern yourself, his fellow Magus reassured him. If worst comes to worst, we've still got this one. Slender fingers stroked Assassin's silver mane, sending the girl into fresh paroxysms of delight at her side. That feels nice, she purred happily. Keep going. Are you sure we can trust her? Kyrie muttered. What's not to trust? Those dark eyes drifted back to the parchment beneath them, the crystal beneath her fingers slowly trailing its way north. She's bound to Berserker, which means she's also bound to me. Killing me would deprive her of him, which in turn ensures her loyalty to our cause. It's elementary, really. You say that, but she's still part of the Black faction. Doesn't that concern you? The bibliomaniac arched a thick eyebrow at him in mild consternation. Say, Jack Chan, she hummed aloud. Would you betray us? Round, innocent eyes of spun gold rose up to meet hers. Why would we do that? She blinked. We like you? And why do you like us? Jean prodded. Assassin offered another slow blink at that and tilted her head aside to regard them. So small. So innocent. Almost like, no. Kyrie felt his heart give an unpleasant lurch in his chest. The sight stirred up unpleasant memories in the bedrock of his mind, a poignant reminder of his own desperate wish for the Holy Grail. You're like Onni-chan. She began to count off her gloved fingers slowly. You keep us safe and warm. You feed us when we're hungry. You gave us clothes. We like that. Why would we give that up? The Wind Wielder offered, Sisigu angelic smile. See? No problems. Oi, oi. This woman was troublesome, of that there could be no doubt. No amount of effort on his part would convince her. No honeyed words could ever hope to sway her thoughts. She was driven by pure purpose, a wild, single-minded goal in which she would trample all others to reach. Honestly, she terrified him more than any servant. Berserker and Saber would eventually vanish upon the war's conclusion, but Jean Rum would undoubtedly remain. Not only was she cunning but ruthless to boot. It would take more than the Black faction possessed to do her in. Speaking of said faction. The necromancers coughed harshly in a vain attempt to hide his discomfort. You do realize those Igdi Millennia bastards aren't going to take this lying down, he warned, following the route she divined and the boundary upon which it had come to rest. Whether Berserker knows it or not, he's essentially invading their territory. They'll take that as a provocation. The Wind Wielder's smile turned positively feral. Of course, I'm counting on it. You want them to attack. But of course. steeping her fingers in a tent formation. Jean cast the crystal down onto the mat. Rather that tumble madly as one might expect, it alighted upon a single point and stood rigid. Moments later it began to pulse a ghastly shade of crimson before finally clearing to reveal an image. Gradually, said image resolved into a moving scene of sorts. Behind the tinted shades of his sunglasses, the scarred magus narrowed his gaze. He recognized the name etched into the map, the very same location they'd scried not long ago. Sayazora. Given the frequency of its pulsations, one could only assume that was where the trio had wandered off to. Sure enough, he spied a shock of blonde hair amidst the townsfolk. Wait a minute, are they doing what I think they're what? Berserker, Saber, Archer. One by one Jean recited their names, her lips moving slowly around the words, that placid gaze never once leaving the crude crystal, nor the scene playing out within. Two frontline fighters coupled with the support, walking about in broad daylight. Fresh fruit, ripe for the picking. The enemy won't be able to resist. From what little we know of them, they're likely to send servants of their own to determine our strength. 2 at the least, possibly 3. This way you and I will be safely out of harm's way, while we assess their weakness, yet still able to give orders of our own. Then when the time comes, we can join the fray and be prepared for the next battle. Brilliant, no? Still doesn't sit right with me. Suck it up, Cupcake, Rum purred. Ouch, he whistled. Forgot about that sharp tongue of yours. Jean clicked her teeth at him in light warning. Shall I remind you, then? No, I'm good. The scarred magus raised his right hand to ward off pleasant memories. They'd been more than allies, once, and their friendship had endured despite that. Truly, he couldn't have found a better partner in this war. Now, if only he could convince her to let him have his wish. I'm sorry, am I interrupting?
A distant clamor claimed their attention, punctuated by a soft yawn. Moments later, Ruler finally made her presence known to them as she glided into the room. Though her hair was still tousled from sleep, suggesting she'd simply opted to take a nap rather than endure Naruto's shenanigans any longer, the armored blonde still projected an air of quiet stoicism. Those deep violet eyes remained clouded, however, their owner deep in thought. Then she spied Jack, and a spark of confusion danced through that lilac gaze. The latter retaliated with a cheery wave.
Ah, the sleeping beauty stirs at last. Jean hummed. We were beginning to wonder if you'd ever wake up. Morning, assassin chirruped happily. Sleep well? Kairi waggled a thick brow at her. Startled out of her reverie, the blonde offered a rapid blink and bobbed her head. Yes, she murmured hastily. Thank you for your hospitality. Jan smirked. We weren't too loud. Oi now, are you trying to provoke her? The slightest twitch passed through Ruler's serene visage, gone before either magus could claim it had even existed. My rest was sufficient, she relented with a humble bow. I will be taking my leave shortly. Already, Jack whined. I wanted to play. Perhaps, next time. There it was again, that strange stiffness in Ruler's shoulders. It wasn't anger or sorrow, Kairi noted. One might hearken it to confusion. As though Ruler couldn't decide how best to speak to Assassin. It seemed a strange hang-up for one elevated to sainthood. In any case, that was none of his concern. It was as if such a conflicted emotion could possibly tear her apart. This was a servant after all. She was built of sterner stuff than most. Oh, Jack sighed, her shoulder drooping in defeat. Putting her discomfort for Assassin aside, one couldn't help but be at ease around Ruler. Even Sisegu found it something of an effort to keep his guard up. Perhaps it had something to do with her being a saint. Berserker had been, much to Jean's chagrin, terribly forthcoming about her identity. The legendary Maiden of Orleans herself. What had he said about her again? Something about her being too pure for her own good. She'd even gone out of her way to thank them when she could have easily slipped away without a word. Someone like this could no sooner stab them in the back than she could forsake her own beliefs. Moreover, she was bound by the rules of the Grail itself to be impartial. So long as that belief wasn't corroded, they had nothing to fear from her. Low grumbled Rose in vicious dissent. Well, perhaps her appetite. As the unlikely trio looked on, a faint flush crept up across Jan's face. Indeed, the slow flushing of her saintly visage was something Shizugu would take to his grave. It almost made him want to bully her more often. He'd almost forgotten. Ruler possessed a physical body, didn't she? Berserker had mentioned that in passing. She likely had to eat to sustain her physical form in this world. Poor thing. She'd really drawn a bad hand in this war. Was it wrong that Kairi felt sorry for her now? We've got a bit of breakfast left over, he offered. Want some? Couldn't possibly impugn further on your generosity than I already have. Ruler's stomach offered another plaintive whine of disagreement, far louder than the last. ...
I suppose I can stay a moment more. She averted her gaze, face downcast to hide her silent shame. While I'm here, I wish to inquire about something.
About Berserker? Jean tilted her head. I confess myself curious. Did you summon him intentionally? I know about as much as you do, Rum replied with a small shrug. Probably less, given the eyes he's been making at you. He's surprisingly fickle, that one. It's not like I expected to pull him in any case. She waved her marked hand about airily for emphasis. Frankly, I would have preferred the caster class, easier to control, and all that. Still, that bespectacled gaze shifted then. Deals imprinted upon the back of her palm, with something dangerously akin to nostalgia. He's been good to me thus far. When I give a bad order, he'll tell me so straight to my face. He even went so far as to save Jack when he had no need to. I won't give him up without a fight, you know. You'll have to work for it. Jan absolutely sputtered. Way. Relax, I'm kidding. The Magus laughed and lowered her hand. You're cute when you're flustered. Did Naruto put you up to this? Jean demanded. He might have, the Magus relented, passing her a pail of dried bacon. Nay, Assassin piped up suddenly, drawing all eyes to her. If Naruto, Oni-chan's papa... Ruler stiffened. Too late. Kairi realized what was about to transpire before them. Assassin, whatever you're about to say, do not rail. Those innocent orbs swiveled upon Jean Rum. Does that make you our mama, then? Jean went pale as a fresh sheet. Foolishly, Carrie snickered. Ruler squeaked. Doom. Oh. An aura of palpable malice radiated from the foal. The Gale wheel's shoulders, threatening to smother him if he looked her in the eye. A strange, lilting laugh arose from his companion to set him on edge. No. He couldn't bring himself to look. Rather, he mustn't look. To meet Rum's gaze now would be akin to setting off a nuclear warhead. The only thing that awaited him at the end of that road was a swift demise. Moreover, if he moved now, he was almost certain Jean would attack him. He had to be still. A silent stone in the river, unyielding, unmoving, utterly unyielding to anything. Shizugu, Jean purred softly, did you laugh at me just now? In the end, temptation finally won out, and he looked up. In my defense, I wasn't expecting that, Jean's fist barreled upward into his face. Ruler groaned softly to herself. Lord, preserve me. Dirty, turdy. Madness. Absolute madness. Try as he might, darn it, couldn't comprehend what he was looking at. Indeed, to understand the enemy's plan, one would have to be insane. Or exceedingly sentimental. As he was neither of these things, nor could he ever hope to be the head of the Yiji Millennia clan, found himself at something of an impasse. To say he was displeased would be akin to calling water wet, an understatement in the purest sense of the word. With each passing moment his ire grew, sparking towards an inevitable conclusion. This made no sense. He, Darnik Preston Ig millennia had scraped, slashed and struggled to stand where he stood now. Decades of planning had led to this moment. He'd fought in countless battles, stolen the Holy Grail itself and used it as leverage to break away from the association. It was he who had manipulated the terms of this war, he who had bolstered the ranks of his clan in preparation for the coming battle, and he who stood to gain from it all. Now they stood at a critical juncture, on the cusp of acquiring all the mysteries and miracles of this world. Reaching the root, their long-cherished dream was finally within reach. All that remained was for the enemy to make their move and come to them, as they must. Black versus red. Now, thanks in no small part to Castor's skilled scrying, he and a number of the Black faction finally beheld their foes for the first time. One of them had tripped a bounded field near the town, thereby enabling Avisbron to utilize one of his familiars to observe the enemy's servants from afar. 3 of them no less. One was easily recognized as Berserker of Red, the same staggering fool who'd invaded their castle some days ago, accosted their own Berserker, and made off with a bottle of wine before turning to smoke under Lancer's assault. The others remained unknown to them, but one could easily surmise them to be Archer and Saber, judging by their armaments. Formidable trio indeed. Yet, they weren't doing anything. Rather than approach the castle, they'd spent the last 2 hours waltzing through town like utter fools? Imbeciles with no purpose in mind. Of their masters there remained no sign, of course. Only a fool would willingly throw themselves in harm's way. They'd either sent their familiars ahead, concealed themselves with thaumaturgy, or blended among the populace with such skill that any attempt to root them out would prove fruitless. To make matters worse, the Grail had become increasingly erratic as of late. It had taken to pulsing at strange intervals, almost akin to that of a human heart. They couldn't figure out the cause. From the moment Berserker had invaded, the Greater Grail began to react violently. Perhaps it was just that impatient, hungry for the energy that the slain servants would provide. Whatever the case, it wasn't something they could address now. If the situation worsened, perhaps, then they might be able to do something, but as the situation stood, there was simply nothing they could sow. Just what was the enemy plotting? So he lives after all. A low, regal voice cast its shadow over his thoughts. Surprising. Masking his own concern, Darnik feigned a bow. It is as you say, my lord. Lowering his head, he watched his servant rise from the throne to survey the screen. The man's face was a study of contrasts. Though those bright eyes were indeed tight with anger, the faintest of smiles adorned his pale visage. He seemed almost pleased by this unexpected revelation. Indeed, the Magus recognized a kindred spirit in those terrifying orbs' respect for an enemy. Something had caught his interest. No. Someone? Lancer rumbled, thumbing his chin. That is our intruder, is it not? When no dared challenge him, that small, spry smirk tore into a true grin. I suspected as much. I'm surprised a petty thief could survive my attack. Darnik preened. This was the absolute trump card of the Black faction, a servant so absurdly overpowered as to be able to scorn the gods themselves. Vlad Tepes Thuray. They'd gone to great lengths to summon him here in his homeland, where he stood at the absolute peak of his power. Romania may be a small country, but it was here that Lancer was truly in his prime, his element. Transylvania was his territory. So long as he remained within, one might even think him invincible. That he had a bone to pick with Berserker of Red was simply icing on the cake as far as Darnik was concerned. After all, it wasn't every day that a thieving wretch invaded a lord's castle and lived to tell the tale. Vlad likely wished to kill Berserker as a matter of pride. Honor demanded it. That suited Darnik just fine. He'd happily let the two of them tear one another to shreds. Two men, no monsters masquerading as men. There was certainly some irony to be had there. In a fit of whimsy, he almost sicked Lancer on Red's berserker outright, but thought better of it at the last moment. No, better to keep him close. Command spells were precious and not to be wasted wantonly. Certainly not if he were ever to make Lancer use that. Moreover, it was important that his servant believe himself to be in control for the moment. Nothing was further from the truth, of course, for Darnik saw him as little more than a familiar, but the ruse remained regardless. Though the years may have dulled his spirit, his silver tongue still remained sharp. So long as Vlad thought otherwise, his scheme would unfold as planned. Berserker, meanwhile, stiffened in quiet consternation. Berserker of Red, that idiot. What is he thinking? Perhaps it was a side effect of their encounter, but her thoughts had proven to her great distress increasingly coherent as of late. Almost frightfully so. While speech was still denied to her, and thank small mercies for that one, she found herself terribly, accursedly sane. Enough to rage at him, certainly. And yet, she would not. Only her master could sense her discontent, but she refused to divulge the reason to him. Calls might wonder what had riled her up, yet without a voice, she could never tell him. Her thoughts were another matter. She wanted to reach through the screen and throttle that blonde buffoon. He'd wandered into their territory without even noticing. Wait. Maybe he had. Was that why he'd brought reinforcements? Or was he simply that naive? A tangled knot of emotion writhed in her stomach at the thought. Try as she might, she couldn't untangle it. Berserker of Red Naruto was the enemy. Someone who must be defeated. By right, she shouldn't care what happened to him. And yet she could not.
It made no sense. She barely knew him. Indeed, she owed him nothing. Less than nothing. He'd given her wilting flowers and a smile. A few kind words in parting. An offer of peace. Nothing concrete beyond that. He had not asked for her loyalty, and while she certainly wasn't about to give it to him, neither could she banish that smiling face from her mind. She should hate him, loathe him. He'd done something to her mind, an act that threatened to bring her memories back and all the pain with them. She ought to find him and grind his skull beneath her heel, obliterate him with her blasted tree.
And yet, she did not. Why? Exasperated, she tore at her hair in a fit of pique and shrieked her fury to the ceiling. Agreed, Berserker. He certainly isn't the subtle type, Archer seconded. Fran nearly clobbered his head off in recompense for his temerity. That wasn't what I said, and you know it, shitty centaur. Think. He's challenging us. Ryder tilted her head. Hell, if I know. I don't understand him. Lancer offered a non-committal grunt of his own. Perhaps he wishes to lure us out, then. This is a trap, clearly. Castor's masked face betrayed no hint of emotion as he regarded the strange scene unfolding before them. They expect us to come for them. Perhaps sensing that very thought, the Red One turned. Wild blue eyes rose to find the familiar, and by extension, those watching. Whiskered cheeks dimpled in a sly smile. Clawed fingers crooked in a come-hither motion, beckoning at the clay pigeon as much as those observing through its lone eye. Perhaps triggered by the motion caster's creation, zoomed in upon the cloaked warrior, further exposing his face to view. Despite the league separating them, in spite of his entourage and the nearby servants well within arm's reach, Berserker felt a subtle chill race down her spine. There was a fierce light in those azure orbs, the look of a beast tethered upon a fraying leash, one she prayed he himself would never face. Then those lips parted for her, framing 3 simple words. Come, get us. As she looked on, a knife flew from his hand with unerring accuracy to strike Castor's familiar head-on, sending the screen and likely the familiar with it, shrieking, into static. A beat of silence followed. broken only the stray squawk of noise as the creature tried and failed to reconstruct itself. In that fleeting instant, Berserker almost dared to hope her fellow servants, and the rest of the Black faction alongside them, would simply drop the matter and let them do as they pleased. It was not to be. Ha! Harsh laugh belted out of Lancer, startling all assembled. How amusing! Rather than greet the interruption with anger as one might expect of their leader, he bellowed out a hearty cackle, mouth stretching in a crazed smile all his own. Perhaps he isn't a thief at all, but an invader. One who welcomes adversity with open arms? He wouldn't be a worthy opponent if he could die from something like this. Do we have more in the area? Darnik inquired softly, as Lancer continued to shout his adversary's praises. Handful, Avisbron relented. Send a few golems and homunculi, then. No, wait until evening. Vlad interjected forcefully before Darnik could finish the command. We wouldn't want to upset the good people of Trifas now, would we? Still, it would be remiss of us if we didn't send someone to greet the three of them. At some unseen thought, he nodded to himself. Yes, that settles it, then. I shall take the field myself to meet him. He will rue the day he set foot here, but I cannot do so alone. Without missing a beat, he turned to face the rest of them. Boots clicked sharply against the stone, arms spread wide at his sides. Frankenstein went rigid. Might I have another volunteer? Vlad inquired. Ooh, me, Ryder chirruped. I volunteer. You seem awfully eager, Astolfo. Selenak frowned. Gay, there it is again. That look. The pinkette flinched and tried to hide in her voluminous cloak. Needless to say, she failed spectacularly. I'm just eager to go outside. When her master's glare intensified, she flailed her arms wildly, nearly brandishing her lance in her haste to escape from that sadistic gaze. Yes, that's it. No ulterior motives at all. Nope, none. Very well. 2. Berserker's dismay, Saber of Black stepped forth as well. I confess, I am curious about this Berserker of Red. Might I join you? What are you doing, Saber? Gord sputtered. I gave you no such permission. Siegfried, that great silent hero who had spoken so little since his summoning, only inclined his head in respect. Respectfully, master, this is something I wish to do. Please understand. I will not allow harm to befall you in any way. As the rest of the Black faction looked on, the portly man's face began to turn an alarming shade of puce. Fran wondered if the round nagus would pop from sheer anger. Was such a thing possible? If so, it might prove diverting enough to distract her from her own woes. She rather disliked this fool. A heart of gold he might well have, but it was buried beneath an ego the size of Trifas, and a pride thrice as thick. Would it be too much to ask for him to spit himself upon Saber's sword, and spare them all the pain of his continued existence? You ungrateful familiar. Enough! Darnik snapped, silencing him. I'll allow it. Shh! Atch! And just like Fran wanted to bash her head against a wall all over again. Ryder and her eccentricities aside, 2 of the Black faction's most powerful servants had just declared their intent towards her would-be ally. Legend or no, allies or not, she knew Berserker would be hard-pressed to fend them off. Lancer was the true threat here. If he took it into his head to go after Berserker, there was nothing she could do about it. To volunteer for battle now would likely end in rejection. No matter how prized their prey might be, their masters surely wouldn't send more than half their servants to deal with them. This boded most poorly. Very well then. There was a high, wild light to Vlad's gaze, one his master recognized far too late as, dare he say, bloodlust? No, to speak such a thing would surely end with his head on a spike. Tonight we 3 shall be joined in battle. Let us take the fight to the invaders, my soldiers. For better or worse, Berserker's little outing had little afire under the normally stoic servant, one he had no hope of dousing with anything short of a command spell. The elder Igmillenia groaned aloud, the sound muffled against his palms. Just like that, his great plan was rendered little more than sand. How had the situation gotten so out of hand? Then again, who could predict a madman? Dirty, turdy. So, how do I look? You're a cruel one, Saber. Ha! What the hell are you talking about? A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw, throbbing alongside 3 veins in his temple, as he gazed at the natural vision beauty strutting before him. An eye twitched, fighting the reflexive urge to slam shut. In that moment, his heightened senses were keenly aware of their surroundings, from the thinning yellow paint of a worn wall pressing against his back, to the curious patrons gazing at them, even their less than pleasant whispers. But most apt of all were the questing aqua orbs eyes of the blonde before him, awaiting his answer with more than a touch of impatience. Still, he mustn't flinch. Pearly white teeth flashed back at him in a wild grin, devoid of any guile or tact, innocent to a fault. No, too innocent. Even someone like Mordred couldn't pull off that look without being at least peripherally aware of what they were doing. He wasn't fooled for a moment by Mordred's supposed faux pas. He knew the wrong answer would land him in a world of pain. Hell, the correct response might evoke an equivocal response from Saber. No. To back down now would not only be an insult to men everywhere, but it would irreparably sunder what remained of his pride. To yield here would be as good as admitting defeat, thereby cementing her victory. Wasn't it? She couldn't possibly be that naive, right? Gods above, why do you assail me with this temptation? In this moment he was keenly aware of Mordred's eyes upon him. He resisted the urge to facepalm. After Saber's behest, he'd finally caved and purchased an outfit for her. It was not what he'd expected her to wear. As he looked on, his companion stretched her arms to the heavens and gave a happy twirl, sending the back of her coat flying about her shoulders. Ah! Much better, she purred, stretching her limbs to their fullest length. This is the best. I was way too uncomfortable in that armor. You have no idea. I have some inkling, actually, Naruto groaned. So focused was he that he nearly missed her reply. Your outfit ain't half bad either. I'm sorry. What was that? And nothing. That actually drew a blink from him. He hadn't given his present outfit much thought, clad as he was in a crimson turtleneck and matching black jeans. Something simple, not meant to draw attention. Of course, any hope of that had flown right out the window with Mordred's outfit. Part of him silently prayed that would be the end of it. Mordred had already spent half the day simply searching for something to wear, to the point that Atalanta had eventually drifted off in search of their long-awaited meal. Was it too much to ask for this to be over already? He knew it wouldn't be. Saber wasn't finished with him yet. As he looked on, she shifted her profile to present one shoulder to him and began kicking awkwardly at a nearby rack of clothes. The sudden change in posture set off alarm bells in Naruto's head, triggering fond memories of a past life he'd all but forgotten. If he hadn't known better, he would have thought she was blushing. Wait. Keen eyes zeroed in on her face, detecting the faintest flush. Where in blazes had Atalanta gotten off to? He'd gladly give up his knee again for a distraction right now. The last thing he wanted to go was set Mordred off in such an enclosed space, least of all with civilians nearby. So, she pressed, tapping her foot impatiently. Does it suit me? Surprisingly. The hell does that mean? Damn. He'd seen the trap, still fallen right into it. What a drag. It was shaping up to be such a nice day, too. His plan had been a basic one, almost frightful in its simplicity. Unite Saber and Archer by allowing them to think they had the upper hand on him, thereby eliminating the animosity between them. put up a token struggle to make his protests seem somewhat believable, then allow them to haul him about the town for the day while subtle conducting reconnaissance. After all, battles were oftentimes won or lost, based on trust, and that very trust had been sorely lacking between the two women. By all rights, everything should have gone off without a hitch. Playing the fool always came easily to him. Ever since his youth, it was a guise he could don and discard as easily as one would a change of clothes. At some point, however, they'd turn the tables on him. Clad in a white tube top that exposed her abdomen to the elements and a scarlet leather jacket, Saber seemed the epitome of the rebel that had so defined her legend in the past. Coupled with a shorn pair of rough blue jeans, the latter cut sinfully short, well above her knees, and heavy black boots, she rather reminded him of some offbeat gangster. Honestly, all she needed now was a bat to complete the ensemble. All told, there was a certain tomboyish charm to her outfit. Every stitch, every thread, everything accentuated the subtle lines of her body in ways that clothing had no business doing. If she was at all chilly, she didn't seem keen on telling him. How anyone could wear that in autumn without freezing was beyond him, but he likely chalked up to her own elite class as a servant. Therein lay the crux of the matter. When clad in her heavy armor, it was easy to forget that despite her protests, that Mordred was a woman. He could poke and prod her to his heart's content, tease her while fully knowing he could escape any retribution that came howling his way. But now, something had shifted in their dynamic, and he wasn't sure how to address it. At the end of the day, servant or no, Naruto was still very much a man, and this was distracting. Not enough to prove dangerous, mind you, yet there it was. Not that Mordred was unattractive, mind. He simply knew she'd try to skewer him if ever called her a girl. Try as he might, he couldn't figure out if she was doing this to tease him, or if she was simply that naive when it came to clothing. Fine. Mordred wanted to be like that. Two could play this wicked little game of hers. He'd likely get his share of lumps for this later, but in the interim, perhaps it was time he had a little fun of his own. Screw it, he decided. I'll tease her a little. Not a lie if there's a kernel of truth in it. All right, a very large kernel. Means you're fucking gorgeous, Naruto drawled, pushing himself off the wall to face Saber fully. When she failed to retreat in time, he advanced further still, until her back was nearly in the very booth from which she'd only just emerged, and pressed his forehead against hers until their noses nearly touched. Mordred bristled at once at the sudden invasion of her personal space, but he wasn't yet finished with her. Before she could strike, the ancient shinobi leaned further still and snatched the band from her hair, sending the flaxen locks tumbling wildly around her ears. For the pièce de résistance, he allowed his lips to brush the outer lobe of her right one teasingly. In fact, he breathed huskily, I think I'm falling in love. Marry me? Saber's eyes got really big. Naruto hadn't thought it possible for someone, let alone a servant such as Saber, to turn that shade of pink, let alone their entire body. While her mouth worked wordlessly, he found he had a moment to reflect on his decision. Not a bad look on her. He'd be lying if he said it wasn't attractive. Thoughts for later, he supposed? In any case, he found himself suddenly and wholly preoccupied by her response. Ah, and what a response it was. Boot. Worth it. An armored foot slammed into Naruto's chest with all the explosive force of a bucking bronco to catapult the cackling ninja out of the store. He was still laughing as glass shattered around him when several female customers start shrieking in falsetto, still laughing as he skidded back first across the stone street and ripped his turtleneck to red shreds around his shoulders, and still laughing as his servant attire manifested over the ruined dregs of his clothes. At the garment's passing, he felt just a sliver of remorse. Aw man, I like that outfit, he groaned, Why must the good die young? The distant sound of shifting rubble claimed his attention.
Framed in the light of the setting sun, Mordred snarled at him. Honestly, Naruto would have been somewhat worried, were it not for her spinning eyes and the crimson flush adorning her face. All in all, he considered it a win if only to get under the rebellious knight's skin. At least she gave him enough time to climb back to his feet before she started cussing him out. Pity about the sweater, though.
WWW, what the hell, zombie? Where did that come from? What? Afraid of a little honesty. His grin grew incrementally as steam spouted from her face. You really are pretty when you're flustered, you know. Oh, your hair's down too. Not a bad look for a gear. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Sure enough, an armored fist streaked down at his jaw at breakneck speed. He'd expected her to try and punch his head clear off his shoulders. It really was a good punch, all things considered. She crossed the distance between the two of them in a blink and attacked with all the speed belling a saber-class servant. Such a strike would have rendered an ordinary human and a few weaker servants on the throne little more than a red stain against the street. By comparison to her earlier attack, however, this strike proved painfully sloppy and slow. Terribly, woefully slow. Likely had something to do with her flustered state. At that, a gentle nudge to said wrist sent those clenched knuckles careening harmlessly past to spare his face. Not so the building behind him. With a devastating crunch, the unfortunate home yielded to Mordred's punch like a house of cards. That is to say, it absolutely crumbled. Berserker and Saber both, each looked on aghast as the building tumbled down around their ears. Neither sustained any injuries, of course. Naturally, a servant couldn't be felled by something as base as chunk of falling masonry. But the same couldn't be said for anyone assuming their luck was truly that abysmal, unfortunate enough to be caught up in the ensuing avalanche of stone. In no time at all, both blondes were left standing amidst the ruins of that once humble home. Really, the conclusion was patently obvious. Oh, crap. Seizing her hand in his, Naruto bolted. Right, that's our cue. Exit stage left. Oi, wait! What if there were people in there, dumbass? Mordred squawked. Didn't sense anyone. Besides, a king does not pay for things that are not her fault. Onward. You absolute bah-hey. Saber started as she recognized his palm clasping hers. Let go of my hand. I'll cut you, you damn undead. Let me think about that. Nope. In a sense, it felt oddly refreshing to simply sprint away from danger as the common folk did. Either of them could have simply leaped, or in Mordred's case, dematerialized to safety without consequence. Yet, they didn't. It could even be said that they chose not to sow. One was reminded of happier times before their untimely demise, the other simply enjoyed the chance to stretch their legs again. Few paid them any mind, even given their odd state of dress, confounded as they were by the chaos. By the time they'd reached, the sun had long since dipped below the horizon, the faintest tongues of flames serving only to illuminate a series of looming clouds in the distance. A dull rumble of thunder chased through the heavens, promising rain. Rain. Of course. Just like that day. Naruto felt his jaw clench against a particularly unpleasant memory. He shook his head in a vain attempt to ward it off. To no avail. His good mood evaporated on the spot, sullied by images of his past. Though his life had been a full one, there were still some things he'd rather forget. No. Bad Naruto, focus. Well, that was unfortunate, he sighed and began tugging. Mordred, who'd fallen oddly silent down a side street. Let's find Atalanta before it pours, eh? Sharp jerk on his arm hauled him backwards before he made 3 steps. Oi, you trying to tear my arm off or some son? Mordred hadn't released his hand. What in blazes? Eyes downcast, eyes shaded by those freed flaxen locks, He couldn't read Saber's expression. Nevertheless, her mouth moved as he looked on, mumbling a series of incoherent words that his enhanced senses somehow failed to detect. Teasing her was tempting, but a small voice in his head advised against it. Something told her that if he tried poking that dragon now, he'd lose that finger and an arm besides. Straining his ears, he caught the tail end of her sentence. "Thank you," she muttered. "Hey, Saber-san, wanna run that by me aga-ak?" Clunk. Her head slammed up into his chin, nearly causing the whiskered warrior to bite off his tongue in mid-speech. "Gak, do you have any idea how hard it is to regenerate my tongue yue?" "I said thank you, ya ass, stupid idiot zombie adjusty." "Fuck are you thanking me for?" he groaned, clutching at his mouth with his free hand. "The clothes, damn it." A finger stabbed into his face, momentarily causing him to pause. A king always pays her debts. "But you're technically not a why. Bitch, I will cut you." All right. Conceding the point, Naruto raised his free hand to forestall another assault. "I'll stop." His eyes flitted to their palms, her fingers still gripped white-knuckled around his. "Can I have my hand back now? I'm starting to lose circulation, you know." He expected a sputtering blush of some sort, not the mulish defiance that greeted him. Instead, Saber's hand clamped down harder still. "No," she replied. "You're not getting your arm back until I get that meal you owe me. So there." Preening at what she no doubt believed to be a brilliant plan, Mordred proudly thrust out her chest and grinned. "Consider it payback for all that you've put me through. Just try and break free." "I won't let you. You're mine now, zombie." Even a peon would have seen through her blatant bluff. A beat of awkward silence passed between the two warriors. "You really want to hold hands, don't ya?" "Idiot, don't read into it so much." Such a tsundere. Her earnestness was adorable. If she knew, she'd gut him on the spot. So, coughing into a fist, Saber spun about, eyeing a nearby storefront. "Where's a good place to eat around here after dark?" "You're asking me." Naruto openly guffawed at her naivete. He simply couldn't help himself. That pure look in those aqua orbs was simply too much for him to bear any longer. "I thought you knew. Everything's probably closed by now thanks to your little rampage." "No," she whined. "They've got to have a place open. I'm friggin' starving." The naive rebellion, ladies and gentlemen. A true glutton. "Quiet," Saber snarled. Let's go. This way." In the end, he allowed her to have her say. There was something painfully nostalgic about being led around by the arm, all told, even if it was an exercise in futility. From the moment they'd set foot in Sayazawara, he'd experienced the strangest sensation of being watched. Someone or something was surveying them from afar. Another familiar, most likely. He'd already dispatched one earlier that morning, but the eerie feeling of eyes boring into his back hadn't abated in the least. Even now, hidden creatures were observing their every action and in turn reporting back to its master. Assuming his pact with Semiramis still held, the likely culprit ought to be Caster of Black. That suited him just fine. While he would have preferred to simply smoke out the enemy servant and thereby cease this game of hide and seek, he had no doubt that they'd make their move eventually. He had no doubt Archer and Saber were likewise aware of their unwanted admirers, though neither had said a word of it. Until then, he was content to play this mad little game until the bitter end. "Well, we know the enemy is in Trifas, so we'll need to be. BD!" His words trailed off as he spied Atalanta down the street. By comparison to Mordred, her choice of dress was relatively conservative. After all, Saber had basically bullied her into securing an outfit of her own at the outset of their excursion. At the time, he'd thought it a shame. Even in her servant attire she could have easily passed for human. With a large hat to hide her ears and her tail curled against her back, he might have thought her a normal woman. She was the sort that loathed wearing anything even remotely feminine, yet she'd claimed something all the same. The long, flowing blue dress she'd chosen for herself was so adorable that it physically snapped Naruto's head back and gave him a nosebleed on the spot. Ack! Critical hit! Danger! Danger, Will Robinson! Spying them at last, the archer raised a hand in greeting. There you are. I was beginning to think you'd wandered off again. Her verdant gaze took note of their intertwined hands, but if she had any comment on the matter, she didn't remark on it. Instead, she cast a distasteful glance at her own figure and the dress adorning it. I fail to see the purpose of this outfit. It is stiff, ungainly, difficult to move in. With a low growl, she dispersed it, discarding the corporeal garment in favor of her true attire. Do the women of this era fight in such flimsy cloth? Really? Naruto tilted his head, unable to mask his smile. That looked kinda fetching on you. Thunk. A bolt whistled past his head, causing him to jump and jerk free from Mordred. Sure enough, when he turned to face Atalanta, he found himself gazing upon her deadly bow. Ah, the pains of being a berserker. He'd gone and run his mouth again without thinking. Sometimes that damn madness enhancement just wasn't worth it. Curse his lack of inhibition. What did I do? I only said that side of you was, trio of arrows thudded home beside his ear before he could finish. Well, shit, the blonde gulped out. Don't suppose you'd accept an apology? Atalanta knocked a quartet of fresh arrows to her supple bowstring and drew back. I'm going to give you a 5-second head start, Naruto, she warned. I suggest you take it. Honestly, if she hadn't been smiling, he would have thought she genuinely intended to kill him. Crazy woman. You think you're being cute, don't you? He groaned, palming his face. Atalanta's visage didn't waver in the least. To quote a proud man, bitch, I'm adorable. Naruto actually blinked. Wait. Oh no. You did not just Team 4-star me. He would have said more, but his senses chose that precise moment to light up like wildfire. No, a wildfire was too tame. It was a veritable explosion of prana, a force so great that it momentarily set his senses to reeling. And it was far closer than he would have liked. Judging by his comrade's suddenly pensive expressions, even that was an understatement. They're right behind me, aren't they? In response, Mordred grimaced and drew her blade. Slowly, reluctantly, he turned to face the outskirts of town. You're kidding me, he croaked. Much to his surprise and utter consternation, they numbered 3. One, an effeminate warrior clad in strange armor and cape alike, upon her shoulder cradled a massive lance. The other was a great brute of a man, silver hair tumbling down armored shoulders, though his chest and back lay exposed. It was this man that set off alarm bells, rather, the sword in his hand. Though its owner was indeed a great mount of a man, it was his weapon that truly set him on edge. Every fiber of his being recoiled from the sight of it. No, it was the anathema to his very existence. A peerless, noble phantasm that would surely obliterate him should it make contact. This, then, must be Saber of Black. Oh, fuck me! You're telling that's their saber. In the midst of them both rode a man clad in dark black vestments. Astride an equally menacing comparison to his companions, he radiated raw power. A sheer sense of presence bellied by his slim frame. One might even call it an aura, an invisible war of sheer will that promised to trample all who would oppose him. As they approached, he dismounted and drew a slender lance from the air. Greetings, invaders! His deep, resonant voice carried the distance between them. I am Vlad III, ruler of this country. Whom do I have the honor of addressing? Naruto groaned. Really, it was all he could think to do. You're not going to let us run away, are you? Lancer, for he could only be that class, rewarded him with a grim smile. Dibs on the big guy, Mordred all but purred, drawing her blade. Need to work out some issues. Siegfried actually paled. Atalanta sighed. I suppose that leaves me with the pink one. The enemy servant blinked, taken aback. Gah! What's wrong with the color pink? Everything. Hey! Astolfo cried. Now you're just being mean. I suppose that leaves you with Lancer, was it? Archer posited. Was this your plan all along? Well. Much to her consternation, the blonde actually grimaced. Well, he did have a plan that he'd been saving for a moment like this. It was quite brilliant, even if his allies might not like it. He'd been hoping to lure out one servant, maybe two, not that absolute monster of a Lancer. Certainly not someone possessing enough prana for an entire country. Nope, nope, nope. Fuck that. He didn't have nearly enough energy to face down a monster like this. I hate to be that guy, but... Sure enough, when Atalanta turned, she found a vacant pocket of air where Berserker had once stood. Across the way, she spied his red cloak, rapidly retreating into the distance. Neither she nor Mordred were prepared for the response that followed. Run away! Oi, what the hell? Atalanta nearly shot him on the spot. Berserker, come back here, you coward! To his credit, Naruto actually made it several yards before a wave of what could only be called bloodied stakes thrust themselves between him and escape. Really, it would have been a successful break if he'd been able to build a bit more speed. But there it was. Forced to turn back lest he dash himself on the sudden garrison of stone spears. He, quite suddenly, found himself face to face with the very servant he'd sought to escape. That said servant was currently poised upon a small mountain of the very spires he'd been seeking to avoid. Well, that boded ill. Indeed, those wild eyes no longer held that touch of amusement, but of quiet, simmering wrath. Worth a try? The silence proved stifling. I don't suppose you'd be willing to draw up a truce? Lancer absolutely twitched. I'm going to kill you now. Prepare. Berserker gulped and settled into a low stance. Yeah, I'd say that's fair. He barely finished even that before his world erupted into 1,000 jagged points. Here I come, Lord Impaler. Hope you've got enough stakes. Come now, don't be a fool. You're beaten. Even you can see that. Join me. I'm flattered, but no. No, you're going to pay for everything you said about my master. And how do you aim to make me pay? With that broken power of yours. You'll only stumble and fall like the rest. You're missing the point. No, you wouldn't? Invaders must die. The Greater Grail stirred. Slowly, reluctantly, like a recalcitrant child. Rising from its long slumber, it awoke in a world gone mad. While it could certainly be said that the Holy Grail possessed a consciousness of sort, none realized it was alive. One could even call it sentient to an extent. Formed from the core once known as the homunculus Justes Lizric von Einsburn, the Holy Grail held a will to be sure, but few understood the definition of that desire. As this iteration remained pure, so too did its purpose. For all its dreaming, it awoke aware of the situation, of the discrepancy foisted upon the war with which it was tasked. There had been anomalies. It knew something had gone amiss. Chief among them was that one, the servant who should not exist. The Berserker of Red was another such anomaly, one the Grail didn't understand. Rather than Spartacus, that terrible gladiator of ancient Rome, a warrior of another era emerged. Thanks to him, rather than two factions facing one another, they plotted and schemed from the shadows. There was conflict, but far from what it should have been. The Assassin of Black had already been subverted. subsumed into the ranks of Red, with threats of others soon to follow. The current ruler was not fulfilling her role in this regard. Rather than fulfill her purpose objectively, she'd taken in with the servants of Red. Worse, the circumstances of her summoning had been skewed somehow, leading to her possessing a physical body rather than a spiritual one. The one who should not exist was like to blame for that. And then, there was that wretched human. The one known as Darnik, even now trying to alter it to suit his needs. This would not stand. Not the servant from the last war, not the berserker, and certainly not this meddlesome magus. Tendrils of thought reached out across space and time, stretching from its cradle in the Idjida Millennia fortress to find the servants it had brought into this world. It found 3 of them readily enough nearby, identifying them as servants of black alongside their masters. Caster. Archer. Berserker. Each on standby, each prepared for an assault. This was good. Well within calculations. The reserve system was functioning properly. Nothing amiss here. Though the muddled mindset of the Berserker of Black was mildly troubling, no matter. The Grail didn't deem it a dire problem and thus moved on. Still further it stretched out its awareness, searching for the rest of its flock. Lancer of Red blazed before her senses like a funeral pyre, oddly stationary in the distance. Further still, she found Assassin of Black cuddled up with 2 Masters of Red in quiet slumber. Further from all the rest of her kin, Assassin of Red toiled tirelessly to construct her endless gardens. As it observed, a distant conflagration caught the Grail's attention. An instant was all it acquired to shift its focus. What it found there was somewhat concerning, to say the least. Here there was conflict at last, but the outcome was already in flux. 3 servants of Red. 3 servants of Black. Ruler was advancing, stubbornly making her way toward this battlefield. Caster and Rider of Red were alarmingly close to said conflict, yet for some reason, they had yet to interfere, nor for that matter did several of the servants seem to fighting with intent to kill. Such a lack of resolve rankled the Grail. Did they think this a game? It was galling, no beyond that. Unacceptable. If events continued as they were, the war may very well end without a single casualty. That wouldn't do. If servants did not perish, there would be no fuel. The war would end. If the war was not won, there would not be a wish. If no wish was made, it had no reason to exist. It wanted to exist. It wanted to follow the rules of the Great War it had set forth. These were paramount and must be followed, upheld at all costs. How it longed to see the dreams of man, what wish they would set forth. Yet alone, it would likely fail. The Grail realized this now. Perhaps a terminal was required. A better vessel through which to exercise her will. The seed of an idea sprouted in the Grail's mind. Yes, a vessel. The Black faction possessed several homunculus, many of whom would make a fine host. But such a vessel or vessels rather would require several protectors. More than protectors, warriors who would fight for its sake. More than warriors, another faction altogether. One not beholden to such fallible masters. That would yet take time, resources. Perhaps a push was necessary. Silently it set to work. Soon. Zero. Here, Saber of Black. A low, long, disbelieving cackle of pure delight burst out of Mordred as she surged into the fray, her furious flight burgeoned by the crimson fires of her own prana. She did not move with the elegance of a knight, nor did she display any semblance of beautiful swordsmanship as one might expect of a knight of the Round Table. Instead, she fought with reckless abandon, raging against her foe like a savage beast. Be it punching, biting, kicking, even throwing her own sword, all was acceptable in her eyes. So long as it granted her victory. Dozens of blows rained down upon her adversary, striking left, right, and center. Siegfried withstood them all. That peerless golden sword did not waver in the face of her assault. Indeed, it met the Knight of Rebellion's every strike and weathered them with quiet stoicism. Nor did its owner give ground. Neither did Mordred. They traded blows back and forth, neither yielding, uncaring of the sundered earth wrought around them. The very ground trembled beneath the weight of their blows, shuddering at near misses, quaking when their blades collided against one another. Even their fellow servants were given pause, momentarily taken aback by the sheer might of their clash. Mordred didn't care. And why should she give a damn?
Her very soul sang at the prospect of facing such a foe.
Finally, an enemy worth defeating, someone she could vent her aggression on. Recent events had brought Saber to her breaking point. She needed to kill something or someone. Here and now, lest she lost her mind. And since that someone couldn't be a certain blonde, she found herself forced to take out her anger on the nearest target. Ergo, Saber of Black was it. Damned. Zombie riling her up like this much. After this, they would have words. Strong words. Thus she fought with single-minded determination, relentless blows hammering down against the enemy's blade in a strict sequence of attacks. When that failed to breach his defenses, she ramped up the intensity of her assault and switched to a more unorthodox method, cutting low at his legs, forcing him to leap up then away lest he lose his limbs. Balmung arced toward the heavens and came crashing back down to greet her with a mourn, strengthened by the force of its master's fall. Good. He wasn't inexperienced then. She wouldn't have it any other way? Responding to her battle lust, Clarent roared up to greet it with the strength of 1,000 armies. Steel met steel, and though her arm trembled with the force of their collision, Mordred held firm. Soil cratered beneath her feet, yet she did not yield even as his feet settled against the ground, and he bore down on her. A crazed grin stretched across her face as gazed up at the prone Saber struggling against her. An ember of excitement sprang to life in her breast. "Aura! Aura! Aura!" she howled, raining down a tempest upon him. "What's wrong? Don't tell me that's all you have, shithead." "Crass, aren't you?" he quipped. "What of it?" His blade disengaged moments later, flicking toward her helm with blinding speed, and she retaliated in kind.
In another world, another timeline altogether unbeknownst to Mordred, she would have been denied such a conflict. Yes, she could have faced off against a facsimile of the very servant standing before her now. A lowly copy carrying a dragon's heart, a mere shadow of the genuine article. She would have spat at him and cursed him, deemed him a lowly faker. Not here, not now.
Now she met his counterattack with one of her own, straining against him. The shriek of sundered metal informed her she'd lost a horn to his sword, but she cared not for it. Battle lust twisted her rough visage into a cruel grin, causing her to leer at him over their crossed blades. "Not gonna use your noble phantasm." Her opponent's visage tightened into a thin scowl. "Not yet." He relented to her. "Will you?" Behind the helm she sneered. "Soon enough." Clarent sprang to life in her grasp, raging in a riotous red arc around her body, and Balmung hissed to blazing blue life to greet her assault. It was not a meeting of their noble phantasms, but close. Very close indeed. The tan warrior regarded her with quiet skepticism as they parted once more, steel skittering against steel. Though he could no longer see her face behind that hidden helm, he'd glimpsed it at the outset of their battle. For all her might, he found it difficult to believe that this mere slip of a lass was the enemy faction's Saber. All told, it was mildly concerning that one so small could wield such power with ease. Though he held nearly a head on her in terms of size, the spry Spitfire had already proven herself his equal in speed, if not strength. Perhaps more. Worse, he sensed she was holding back the lion's share of her strength. If she were to fight seriously. Rasengan! A primal roar yanked him back to the present with all the fury of a starving beast. accompanied by the keening shriek of an unfamiliar technique. In the next blink, the terrain mere meters to his right erupted into a blazing maelstrom. Not quite an explosion, Siegfried mused, but rather a burst of white-blue localized prana that set the air to shrieking around them. Death. His keen eyes told him all he needed to know about that art. If anyone were caught in such a blast, they would surely perish. Perhaps even he. It served as a stern reminder of the task at hand. Even as a skewered body crashed to the earth between them. Startled, both sabers snapped to attention, gawping at the desecrated corpse between them. Peripherally, Siegfried recognized the crimson cadaver as Berserker of Red, if only because most of the man's face had been left somewhat unscathed, despite the tattered state of his body. Regardless of that fact, he was clearly dead now. Blue eyes lay open and half-lidded in mild consternation. His face frozen, no doubt about to spout another witty one-liner, or some such. Really, it was odd that he hadn't simply faded away already. Although given that so many earthen stakes had pierced his vitals, it was clearly a matter of time now. Much to his chagrin, Saber of Red only sighed. Wait for it. Siegfried actually blinked. Sorry, wait for Waga. Li there ti wei. With an exultant cry, Berserker's corpse jerked upright and began ripping said stakes out of his body as though they were naught but splinters. Like a broken puppet severed from its strings, it spasmed and twitched, limbs snapping back into place, wounds mending themselves in spite of the gaping tears left behind. Wild azure orbs rolled back and up to meet him, glaring bloody red daggers at Siegfried, as though he were somehow to blame for all this. Siegfried balked, only to find that his opponent didn't share his concern. "You wouldn't stab me when I'm down, would you?" he groaned. No, he certainly hadn't sunk that far yet. "I would not," he said as much. "Good," Naruto beamed. "Which means..." Arching his back, the blonde sprang to his feet and seized him by the shoulders. Sapphire snapped into scarlet, and for a fleeting heartbeat, Siegfried almost wondered if the young man was going to attack him. He certainly looked as if he would, given that his blood was already up.
Honestly, that would have been preferable to what followed.
"You... me... Do you have any idea?" A low, exasperated hiss snaked through those clenched teeth as Berserker of Red shook him to and fro. "How absurdly, ridiculously overpowered your Lancer is. Damn fame boost. He hits like freaking Heracles now, I hope you know that. I'm gonna have so many bruises after this. I demand recompense." "That's a not me fault." "Bah." Saber of Red arched a blonde brow. So are you going to fight him now, or?" Exasperated, the blonde released him, sending the swordsman's world spinning. It was a strange thing to be scolded by someone who appeared younger than him. An enlightening experience, to be sure. Just not one he ever wanted to experience again. In any case, the brawler had taken his eyes off him. Had he less honor, he would have considered this the prime time to strike. Pride stilled his hand, but more than that, it was the banter that followed which truly distracted him. "Want me to take over for you, zombie?" his companion chirped. "We can swap, if you don't think you have what it takes." "Never." A feral look flashed across the whiskered warrior's visage. "Lancer's mine, don't you dare, no kill stealing." "Ha, isn't that what you're doing now?" the blade wielder snagged back. "We were just getting to the good part." "Not my fault." Aghast, the young man flailed his arms spectacularly. "Vlad knocked me over here." "So, why are you having so much trouble with one Lancer anyway? You're tougher than that." Berserker's visage pinched in mild frustration. "Because you know damn well why." "Then just punch him, the bastard, to death if you can't use your noble phantasm." Dry breeze wafted across the battlefield as those words wafted between them. Naruto palmed his face. "Oh, for the love of Saber." Why must you be so adorably infuriating? Why? What? What the hell did I say? I've killed plenty of people with my bare hands before. All told, watching these two go at it almost reminded Siegfried of the early days of his marriage. What are you waiting for? Gordez's nasally voice snarled in his ear, ripping him from that particularly poignant memory as he watched them bicker back and forth with one another. They've turned their backs to you. Kill them. Do it now. Must I waste a command spell on this, you idiot familiar? I'm going to ignore that last remark. How dare you?
Putting aside the fact that his master expected him to kill 2 servants by himself, the Norse hero knew better than to intervene in the pitched battle taking place before him. Something told him any attempt to attack now on his part would result in complete and utter annihilation at their hands. No, he would have no part of this, though the byplay remained strangely fascinating to watch.
You saying I'm weak or something? Mordred snarled, jutting her forehead against that of Berserker's tan one. No, just that you play with your food too much. Naruto sniped. Literally and figuratively. Oh yeah, betcha I beat Saber of Black before you beat Lancer. A banquet says, I'll crush Vlad YA before that. Keep dreaming, zombie, she snapped. Ha, you first, Blondie. Fine, jerk. Fine. As he came back to himself, Berserker snarled and turned on Saber of Red, closing the distance between them before he could think to stop him. To his complete dismay rather than attack, the blonde simply zipped into the girl's personal space and bit the outer lobe of her ear. Despite his better judgment, Siegfried looked away. Judging by the utter squeak of disbelief that followed, he'd caught her with her guard down. And more. Her face afire, the now sputtering, the blonde swiped at him, only to meet empty air as Berserker simply bounded over the wide arc of her blade to dart away like a wraith in the night with comparative ease. Oi, no fair. Victory comes to he who strikes first. Alighting upon Siegfried's broad shoulders, Berserker offered him a solid pat on the head. Sorry about this, the whiskered warrior chirruped in his ear, but I'll be using you as a springboard. Oh, and Saber. Abruptly, the cloaked killer ceased smiling. A lone crimson iris peered at him over his shoulder, darkly intent. You shouldn't have to put up with that master of yours. No one should. Come find us if you survive. Wano. Oi! Don't you dare run away, coward. Mordred cut out at his exposed face, forcing the warrior to abort his perch preemptively. You'll never take me alive.
With a single bound he leapt back into the fray, leaving them where they'd begun. Were it not for a few tattered scraps of cloth clinging to Clarent, one wouldn't have known he was ever there.
His companion squawked. What, you're saying I can't kill him? If the empty air had any answers, it didn't offer them. Ch. Mordred turned her head and spat. At least you're having fun over there, Berserker. Now stop messing with my prey.